A very, very good evening. Warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, brought to you by Norman Goodfellows. And welcome to what has probably been the least productive day in South African history. A Springbok kickoff at 9, finishing at 11, with the conclusion of not just as dramatic a game as we've seen in some time, but certainly, in my opinion, the single greatest game of rugby ever. You feel for France having had to lose such a cracker, but that is offset by the delight of a South African win into the semi-finals on the back of a game that had us all celebrating last night and either suddenly terribly ill and unable to make work or just doing very little other than Google where we can watch the game on Saturday. A wonderful, wonderful night, and one which I'm taking a significant amount of credit for. You might have seen on social media yesterday my plan to get the Springboks to back-to-back World Cup victories, drinking a bottle of wine with a rugby link from the vintage of the 3 World Cup victories today. And I started with the most recent, and that was last night, some 2019 Rustenfreda Cabernet Sauvignon, Yanni Engelbrecht, proprietor, Jean's dad, a great Springbok himself. Was it a little on the young side? Well, yes, but it was still very, very drinkable. And the first bottle went down almost as well as the second. There were a few of us, and it was great fun, not just cheering on the Springboks, but doing so with a glass of great wine in hand that I definitely feel got Sia and the team over the line by that single point. Which leads me to work out what I'm going to be drinking for this Saturday's game against England. It's a 9 p.m. kickoff Saturday night. It has to be 2007. Needs to have a rugby connection. If you've got any thoughts, feel free to send them through. In fact, I'll ask our guests for some recommendations as well as they jump onto the show in just a moment. And it's a really cool show we have to look forward to today. Somebody who you'll recognize from the show in past episodes is back, but in an ever so slightly changed guise. Well-read magazines, Bubbles Hyland is now the well-read company's Bubbles Hyland. She's also doing some very cool work with the Norval Foundation, and she joins us to talk about her new adventures. And some of the people she's working with are also on the show. We will be joined by Simon from Simelia. We also have Andrew from Mellish Family Vineyards and the Wyk Family Wines. Justin, who's also got a little job on the side in Constantia, will be joining us together to talk about the wine they're making and how we sell and market wine. How do we get it to people? There's so much wine out there. How do you tell your own story? How do you make a difference? How do you ensure that you're getting your wine into the hands you want it to be in and spread the gospel of what you're doing? We'll find out from our winemakers, but also from Bubbles, something of an expert in this regard, during the course of today's show. Before we do that, though, before we meet everyone, let's have a quick look at some wine news. This is news out of the Helderberg. News, I think that's Tim in the corner there, the Mundus Vini Awards, but also reflecting some purchases that have been made in the Helderberg, whereby there is a really, really good piece of news from the Helderberg Vineyards. A whole pile of them bought by DGB, and that is, I think, 100 hectares in total. So saving some great Helderberg vineyards and ensuring that they stay on and are utilized. DGB putting a lot of money into this project. I know Tim Hutchinson's been particularly excited about it, and this is a really big positive step in the right direction, given that so many vines have been taken out of late, so many vines falling away. So big up to DGB, to Tim Hutchinson and the team. Exciting times for the preservation of vineyards in the Helderberg. And congratulations to these guys. This is the South African wine tasting team. You might remember we had them on the show 2 weeks ago while I was in Scotland. Bear Robertson, in the middle there, from Antoine Rupert Wines. He was part of the team that did so well. So congratulations to the guys who finished in the top 10 of the World Blind Tasting Championships. That was held in Provence about 2 weeks ago. The guys did particularly well. Tough competition. I don't think we've ever done better than 6th, so 9th is a really, really good effort. Yeah, very proud to see how well the guys did. So congratulations to all of them. That show's still up if you want to have a watch of it. They gave me a guided tour of wine tasting and was wonderful to see just how they do it and gave me some insight into their brilliance. And I did some wine from earlier on in the week, end of last week, dropped in Beyond, the Peter Tempelhof's restaurant. If you can't get to Fane, this is a fabulous alternative at Bacon Bavacting, especially when you have wine like the two bottles on the right, the Grand Vin from 1988 and from 1989. I think 88 was the first vintage of this, and after 89, it then became the Christine, which it is to this day, a red blend that had that wonderfully aged feel of a South African red that's had some time, but certainly hasn't gone past its best. Food was terrific as well. Had this with some American guests who were in from Aspen. They all loved it, as did I. If you haven't been to Beyond, I highly recommend a visit. Brad making some lovely wine there as well, including a new Pinot Noir and a new Chenin Blanc. Pinot Noir and Chenin Blanc in Constantia. You'll have to drop in and see how they are. I was very impressed. Now, this is happening for our American friends, a Bri fundraiser supporting communities hit by the floods of late. It's at the end of October. This is Andy Woolger and the Elephant Corner Wines team. There'll be a bunch of South African wines and brying to help communities, particularly in the Franschhoek area that were affected by flooding here in South Africa. All of the proceeds will be going back to the farms, and those proceeds will be in dollars, which can only help. Will translate rather nicely into South African Rand. So if you are interested, you can head over to the Elephant's Corner Wine Space online, and they'll have all the details to get you in there. If you're in the South Carolina region, then this is one for you at the end of the month. Diners Club, the winemaker of the year. This looks very top billing-ish, doesn't it? Congratulations to the nominees who have been confirmed. The 18th of November, they will have the actual award, but you've got Charles Hopkins, Dewald Haynes, Joseph Dreyer, RJ Buerta, and Tertius Boshoff taking time away from making brilliant Chenin, is Tertius, to make some terrific Shiraz as well. Shiraz was the category for our winemakers from De Grendel, Dewald Haynes, Raka, Kleiner Zals, and Stellenrush, respectively. And then there are the young guns, Marty Urkamp, Michelle Waldeck, Morgan Stain, Montlebo Langer, Peter Kutsia, and Richard Schroeder, and they've all been nominated for the Young Winemaker category, all making different wines. For the end of middle of November, we'll know who's won that award. It's a very prestigious one, and congratulations to all 11, all 12 of them, and good luck for the awards in November. And then chance to join me on Thursday. I'll be launching with some wine in hand. If you're in Johannesburg, this is phase 3 of Brookfield. So come along, come and say hello, come and drink some wine. There is no charge. Just head online to Brookfield, book your spot, come along and join us, drink some wine, explore some really cool apartments overlooking Royal Johannesburg. Your chance to have a good afternoon out, a couple of glasses of good wine, and check out a really cool development that is now up and running in phase 3 and doing particularly well right next to a golf course and just down the road from the Old Oak, which, as you'll know, is one of my favorite places to hang out. And almost there, this is coming up at Southern Sun. This is the Michelangelo Awards. They're going to be showcasing their wine, and this is coming up on the 10th and 11th of November at the Southern Sun in Rosebank, where not just all of the top wines, but some of the top winemakers as well coming out to give you a taste. Tickets at CompuTicket, 350 Rand per person. Bottomless wine tasting. What could possibly go wrong? And along with that, a light meal, some great wines in that Michelangelo lineup. So yours to taste. If you are in Johannesburg, come along 10th and 11th of November, the Southern Sun in Rosebank. Recently revamped and looking fantastic. And then Monday, the 23rd of October, I will be with Gerard Holden at Holden Manse at the Norman Goodfellows in Fourways. Come join us, tasting through 6 of the wines, including the famous Big G from Gerard. And that includes canapes to match some really good wine. And Gerard is always most entertaining. So come and join us. Small charge, but all that money goes to charity. And that's at Norman Goodfellows website. Okay, and then I must also mention, because I've had 17 messages from her so far today. Melu Lambert winning her award. We have mentioned it on the show, but she's demanded we mention it today because her good friend Bubbles is on the show. Congratulations. A brilliant book on Clan Constantia with Joanne Gibson. And for that, in Paris recently, Melu winning her award at the umpteenth award she's won this year. But congratulations, top wine writer, doing us proud all over the world, as indeed are our winemakers. I think half of them are in France at the moment. Every time I message somebody, they're off watching rugby. We've cornered some who are still in South Africa, though, so let's welcome them, along with the founder of the Well Red Company, which is going to shake up the world of wine in the way only she can do it. Bubbles Hyland, a warm welcome back to Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to Justin, and to Andrew, and to Simon. Guys, lovely to have you all on the show, and thank you so much for joining. It's all celebrating, I'm sure, after last night, and looking in remarkably good condition, given the fact that there was a Springbok game on a Sunday night. It's so lovely to have you all here. And in particular, Bubbles, lovely to have you back on the show, and back with a brand new adventure in the form of the Well Red Wine Company. Before I ask you what the Well Red Wine Company is doing, for people who haven't seen you on the show before, take us back to the Well Red Wine magazine days, and this love of wine that you have that finds its way into not just great writing, but some of the most entertaining social media that South African wine has to enjoy.
Thanks, Dan. So I've been in the wine industry for 12 years now, and previously more in a sales aspect. And when you're spending your days drinking good wine and eating good food, it's a pity not to share it with everybody else. So that's why Well Red Wine magazine was born, to kind of help me use my creative side of my brain, and just to share the amazing experiences I was having. And I also found there was a lack in media in South Africa. Or if you've got the very well educated wine commentators like Christian Eads speaking on Wine Mag, but they speak in a different language necessary to the general everyday consumer. And then you've got some other other bloggers maybe who don't know as much. They don't have such an educated palate, or don't know as much about the wine industry. And there was no one really speaking in the middle, and making relatable content, but knowing what they were talking about. And I wanted to kind of fill that void a little bit. So Well Red magazine was born, I think, probably about 8 years ago. And this year I decided to take the leap and jump into the world of Well Red, fully, for my day job and my passion on the side, and bring them both together. So Well Red Co is it's a marketing specialist for wine brands, basically trying to help the smaller guys. When I first moved to South Africa and I started visiting the wineries, it was my one rule that I didn't want to go to any wine farms where you could fit a coach down the driveway. I wanted to go and sit at the winemaker's kitchen table, sit around the table with a wife or husband, and dogs running around, and really sort of find the smaller guys. And those are the kind of guys who I want to work with, and I want to share their story. They spend their time making really good wine, but they don't necessarily have the resources to have a full-time sales and marketing manager, to have a PR agency. And I wanted to fill that void, but do it in an accessible way. I don't need to have a full-time person on board doing these things. I come in as a consultancy. I offer a 3-month brand incubation period where I can put all the tools and systems in place to help them reach their market and reach their potential, and then I can leave. And again, some people will keep me on for a little bit longer, and look at a long-term strategy. But yeah, that's just the niche that I'm offering is that 3-month brand incubation period, that just to sort of help them get on their way, give them the tools, put the strategy in place, and set them free.
If you or I walk into a branch of Norman Goodfellows and we have a look at the rows of wine, we've got a pretty good idea what's there. We know what's good value. We know what years are great, what wine's terrific, what to look for. We're pretty much the exception to the rule, though. For most people, all of those shelves are quite intimidating. And that means for the people who are trying to sell the wine, it's not an easy job. What makes the Bubbles Hyland, the well-read approach, distinctive in enabling people like the guests we've got on the show today to tell their story and to make sure that people know what their wine is and understand why it's the kind of bottle they should be looking out for?
I think that the problem that we have in marketing in South Africa is that, well, especially in the wine industry particularly, is that we all speak to the same people. We're all speaking to the people who follow you, who follow Wine Mag, who follow me, who follow the wineries, and no one's speaking to the other people. No one's speaking to people who don't really have an interest in wine. They just like drinking it. They don't have the knowledge. They don't care so much, but they do love a story, and they do love the smaller guys. You know, everyone wants to support the smaller guys. So we need to try and link those two together, you know, to introduce the world in a non elite fashion. You know, I want to make wine accessible. It's all about the story. I mean, the content of the bottle is obviously very important, but to make the general consumer remember a wine, it's about the story, it's about the label, it's about meeting the winemaker, about engaging with them on social media, and making it non-elitist. And there's a word that I think I've made up called snobbradery, which I'd like to take out of the wine industry. You know, people shouldn't be scared of wine. They shouldn't be put off by these funny terms that we use and this pompous attitude that it's so accustomed to. Yeah, just to make it more relatable and more fun. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something that people are scared of.
And you're now a couple of months into this new adventure, and you've got some pretty cool people on board. 3 of them joining us today. Before we jump over and meet them, give me a little bit of background on these 3 wines, the winemakers, the wine brands, why you felt you were a good fit, and what they bring to you as an opportunity to tell some great stories.
So they all fit my target market of being a small producers, family owned. You know, the smaller guys, and they all make exceptional wine. I mean, I wouldn't represent anybody who didn't make exceptional wine, obviously. And they've all got their own story, their own character, their own personality. So we've got Justin van Wyk. He's the winemaker at Constantia Glen. And I was introduced to his wines a few years ago. Sorry, I've got a dog scratching on the door behind me. Excuse the noise. So I was introduced to his wines a few years ago. I always knew Constantia Glen wines, but I didn't know about his family range of wines. And I absolutely straight away adored those wines. And Justin and I have known each other for a few years now. So when I brought Well Red Toe into the world, he jumped on the phone and asked if he could be a part of it. So I was very happy to welcome him on. Simelia also got in touch with me. I had heard of them, but I hadn't tasted their wines before. So we had a couple of meetings, and I instantly engaged with Simon and his wife Celia. I love their story. I love their wines. And it's really exciting to be a part of a project. They've been around for 10 years, but they haven't really focused on the local market. So it's really exciting to be a part of sort of that story and that new focus for them. And then Mellish as well. Mellish is based out in, Andrew's based out in Durbanville, which I think is a kind of quite an untouched area. You don't really hear that much about Durbanville anymore. And it's quite an exciting, I mean, the wines he's making are spectacular. Had a day out in the trade with him in the Cape Town trade the other day, and people are bowled over by his wines, and they're really well priced as well. So I think that's the thing, offering wines that offer value, offer a story, introduce people to something a little bit new and something relatable.
Well, let's find out if the wine owners are quite as excited as Bubbles is. I suspect they will be. Justin, lovely to have you back on the show from the heart of Constantia. I was next door a little earlier on in the week, and as always, Constantia, quite charming, and a place that is home mostly for you, but you do head out from time to time to find grapes for the side hustle, which is going so well. Tell us a bit about the Van Wyk family wines in the context of what Bubbles is saying, telling these stories of slightly smaller concerns, slightly more boutique operations that still need to talk to a market and to a customer, but certainly don't have the muscle and power of a big name brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dan. And thanks, Bubbles, for having me on the show today. And yeah, it's just, it's exactly as you said. Our wines are fairly well known within the industry because it's such a small industry, and fairly well known with consumers who've tried the wines. But as a small brand, and it's exactly as you said, Bubbles, it's just you haven't been around for long enough, or you don't produce enough volume to really be recognized in the market. And I think actually spending time having a proper marketing strategy, it just helps more people learn about the wines, and even if it is someone who's maybe recognized the wine somewhere in their past, immediately recognizing it again in the digital world, I think that's going to make the difference. So it's really just to reach more people. And as Bubbles said, we're as winemakers, we really focused on what we do, and we get quite intellectual about making wine. And in terms of marketing the wine, it's not really always on the A list of things to do. So it's really great to have Bubbles on board to assist with that.
And Bubbles takes great joy and pride in telling stories, something she does particularly well. And you've got some really cool stories to tell, because within your family range, not just making some terrific wine, and I've been lucky enough to have quite a bit of it with you, it's the celebration of the family, because you bring the names and you bring the family into all of these wines.
Yes, absolutely. So I produce 2 single variety wines. Those are called Chenin Blanc and Syrah, and those are my single variety wines. But then I also produce 3 blends, and the first that we produced was the red blend in 2016, and that was named after my older daughter, Rebecca May. So obviously, having 2 jobs, having a full-time job at Constantia Glen, and then in any spare time, even on weekends, I was going out looking for grapes, sourcing, speaking to farmers. And I suppose, in the beginning, it was difficult to spend a lot of time at home. And this was really a way to celebrate my daughters, having them, suppose the wines to celebrate them. So this one here, the Olivia Grace, that was the white blend, sort of Mediterranean Cape White blend. And then just recently, last week, in fact, we launched a new wine for a new daughter, Rachel Rose. She was born in 2022. So in 2022, I had a new wine to produce. And Dan, I think you actually tried it way back when I was experimenting, and I was calling it skin fermented white. And then I was told I'm not allowed to call it skin fermented white. So it was just, it was great to have another daughter in the family to name this sort of skin contact white after. And the skin contact white has been received very well. I made it in minute quantities in years past, but now that someone's got ownership of that wine, the plan is to produce more of it. Sort of about in the recent vintage was about 2,400 bottles.
Very small amounts of an absolutely fabulous wine, and I'm glad it's got the name, not just because it's a wonderful tribute and great to have another member of the family, but we know, especially in the marketing space, trying to sell a skin ferment white is a far more difficult proposition than giving it a really cool, and in your case, beautiful name, and celebrating the little ones. So if you haven't tried the wines, they are definitely ones to try. I want to come back and chat in a second about the balance between those 2 roles of winemaker in Constantia, but also with your own brand. Before we do that, though, let's head out to Durbanville and to Andrew Mellish. He's looking very well dressed today. I appreciate the outfit. I'm guessing there was some celebration. What was in the glass last night, Andrew, as the Springboks pulled off that miracle win?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, the game was very stressful, actually, but we managed to pull through. So very happy with the win. I'm sure the whole country celebrated well last night and struggling today. I tried not to drink too much wine, just had a coffee at the end, then straight to bed. But well done to the Bokke. It was a great night, great match.
It was indeed. It's a lovely comparison, rugby and wine, because they both do South Africa so proud right around the world, and they both have a rich history in South Africa. And in particular, we can look at that rich history with your estate, because if I'm not mistaken, there's a link to Jan van Riebeeck in the farm you now call home.
Yes, that's right. So the family farm is called Velblund. It was used as an outpost by Jan van Riebeeck in the late 1600s. We got onto the farm in 1918. It was my great-grandfather. He was leasing the land, and then in 1934, he came into a bit of money from inheritance, and he was able to buy the farm. So I'm 4th generation on the farm, and we've been farmers, sort of focusing on wheat and dairy our whole history. It was only in the early 2000s that we started planting vineyard. So we're kind of new to the game, and the wines that we make now, the first vintage that was released was the 2018 and early 2020, just before the first hard lockdowns. So yeah, we're still very new to the industry in that way.
You have had vineyards for a while, though. I think the 20-odd years there has been some wine planted on the back of what was formerly more of a farm. In fact, as Jasper Wickens, who's watching the show at the moment, says, "Schaapboer" with great excitement. Although I think he's also referring to Justin van Wyk, because he follows it up with Justin van Wyk, "Oh, Schaapboer." Jasper, nice to have you watching the show. The vine's planted, but it obviously was a while until you translated those into wine. What brought the vines onto the farm in the first place, and then what made you decide that it was time to start producing?
Yes, yeah. So I don't know if you can hear me. Seems like it's frozen a bit there, but I'll carry on. Yeah, so around the early 2000s, Durnville Hills went up, and there was a lot of interest in vineyard and in our area. And our neighbors wanted to plant some vineyards, and we were busy with the dairy farm. I was just finishing high school, and I thought I'd rather go into the wine industry than carry on with the dairy. So we did a whole transition over from 2000 to 2004, where we planted 35 hectares of vineyard, and we also sold the dairy herd in 2002. So yeah, while I was doing my degree at Stellenbosch, we were planting all the vineyard. And so we've been delivering all our grapes to Durnville Hills from the beginning, and even up to today, it's 99% is going to Durnville Hills. I just take a few tons for our own brand, and obviously the dream is to expand the range and grow the range, so to be making a lot more of our own wine, not just selling off the grapes.
You mentioned Durbanville Hills. They're huge, very successful South African brand. Do an incredibly good job of not just making and producing and selling wine, but also of telling their story. How terrifying, nerve-wracking, challenging is it when you start your own brand to put your toe in the water, to head out into market, to try and start not just selling your wine, but selling your story, when you've got people like Durbanville Hills who are so big and so well established and have got such a big footprint? Bubbles now helping you to do what you're doing, but how do you face that challenge? How big a challenge was it for you when you started?
Yes, well, luckily, Dan, I was clever enough to keep it very small in the beginning, so that if I couldn't sell the wine, I could drink most of it myself with the family and friends. So it wasn't too much of a crisis if that happened, and I still kept it very small until we sort of see those sales really sort of take off, and that's kind of the strategy. So we're still very much farmers trying to sort of grow a family wine brand. But yeah, I mean, I didn't have any training. I didn't know the trade at all. So it's been quite tough, also not having a lot of time to go into the trade. And so Bubbles has been a massive help in that. She's been in the trade for quite a while. And, she knows everyone extremely well, and it just opens up a lot of doors. And she's also, I think, a lot more attractive and pleasant person to deal with than I am. So I think people are much happier to see her than they are to see me. So it just helps a huge amount. And I'm very happy to have someone like that offering what she's offering, because we don't have the budget for, sort of big marketing teams and stuff. So the way that she's structured, where we can do sort of just a couple months here and there, has really helped make it possible for us to do that.
Bubbles is telling stories so that Andrew can sell wine. What is that wine? We'll get some detail in a second. Let's jump over to our final guest, though, and say hello to Simon. Initially, I would have said Simelia, but now it's a Simon. Is this one of these great South African stories where two names have been sawn in half and then glued back together to make something special?
Yes, you can say so. Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it. It is a name which derives from, obviously, my name Simon and from my wife's name Celia. So when we came up with the name, I thought I'm the big winner because I got the first letters. But actually, when you read Simelia, all you hear is actually Ilia. So Celia got, I think, the better out of that. It's a lovely name.
It is indeed. It's a very distinctive one. It's obviously got a very personal story for you both. What brought it about? What made you decide that wine was something that you wanted to put your time and energy into?
Yeah, if you would have asked me about 10 years ago if we do an interview, I would have said, I don't think so. Obviously, I'm originally from Germany. I came here in 2003, actually just for a sabbatical and to work for the soccer. I was a big soccer fan. I'm a massive rugby fan, but obviously in Germany we can't play rugby. I don't understand why. We have big people there, but that is so. So I came here for the soccer, and in 2008 I met Celia. 2003, when I arrived, I was obviously always interested in wine. Drank a lot of wine in Europe, France, Italy. Then came here, enjoyed the wines, and in 2008 I met Celia, and in 12 we married, and from there we decided during our honeymoon that we are taking over the vineyards from my father-in-law. He had a nursery, he was in a nursery, one of the biggest nurserymen in the country up to a certain age, and then we sold the family farm and moved across to the other side of Grünberg, and there were two old blocks, one Shiraz block, old wine Shiraz block, planted in 1980, and one Merlot block in 1996. And that we took on, and our first vintage was then in 2013, 10 years ago.
So a decade on, when you take on something like this, there's always some romance to it. And I think amplified by the fact that the decision came on honeymoon, it sounds when, oh, we'll make our own wine, we'll put our own name on it. It's going to be so much fun. It doesn't take too long to realize that there is quite a bit of hard work and a fair amount of trouble that comes with this kind of endeavor. How has the reward compared with the, I suppose, the vision, the idea that you had for starting this project together?
Yeah, you're 100% right, Dan. It's obviously, it sounds like a beautiful romantic story, but there's a bit more to that. Luckily, we also started very small. So we produced about 6,000 bottles just to get into the game, mainly exported that. I was quite calm because we only have red wines. Obviously, I didn't have the pressure to immediately sell, or the wines are going off, that I wanted to do it like that. And from the first release in 2000 and beginning 2015, we started to increase the production. I planted a new block, planted another new block, planted another new block. You know, like that addiction, like they say, I warn you, it's true. But it is a slow and static growth. And I think we have been doing very well. COVID hit us a little bit on the export side. But I think we're all sitting there in the same boat. Other than that, that was one of the reasons to chat to Bubbles, to get her experience on board, to increase, I would say, a little bit of the vision and driving a bit more sales into the local markets.
It also gives you the opportunity through somebody like Bubbles to tell the story. And we've certainly learned on Dan Really Likes Wine. It's the stories that people are interested in rather than the malolactic fermentation or the time in barrel or the technical speak that wine can often slip into without realizing. Your story is a very personal one. How big a part of it has it been in telling the story and getting your wine to market, the romance behind it all, and how the brand came together?
Yeah, that's the one part of our story. Obviously, I always say that's the one part. The other part is the product itself, which is for me very important, to only put the best into the bottle. So we are obviously not mainstream. If a barrel is not to my liking, it goes down the drain or goes into Faljapi. We pride ourselves in creating small batches. And one of the batches, for example, the Lucius range, which we started during COVID times, which is a range named after our son, which is called Lucius. And de comes obviously from Latin, means from Lucius. It's a range we brought out just when COVID hit, and we wanted to have this label as a bright, happy, positive label. The backdrop was painted by my son when he was 4 years old. I found it just so beautiful, and we said that's a fantastic label to bring out a new range, but also embrace the fact that we went through difficult times, to start something. So there's the one part of the story of the love between my wife and myself, Celia and myself. The other part is obviously the product, and I'm quite excited for this week. We're bottling the new vintage of the Blanc de Noir. It's old vine Blanc de Noir tomorrow, and then we're having a launch on Wednesday, obviously with the help of Bubbles, and we're launching, and that I think is quite special. We're launching our reserve range, which is also storytelling, but I'm very proud of this because we do a lot of launches at the moment, left, right, center, and I think this is one of the launch which is quite unique. We're bringing out a 2017 vintage, which I think is not very common. So this wine stays for 3 or 4 years in barrels, then minimum for 2 years in the bottle before release.
I think Simon, you, like Andrew, like Justin, have made it pretty clear why Bubbles is having so much fun working with all three of the brands, because there are so many great stories to tell. But what's the process, Bubbles, from taking these stories and translating them into not just a story for story's sake, but a story that will hopefully translate into marketing, translate into sales, translate into these brands having a real bottom line impact?
So when I take a brand on, I mean, every producer is different. Everyone has a different story to tell, and a different unique selling point. So we need to unpack the brand and find what that story is. Maybe reword the story a little bit, highlight certain things that I think will be more relatable than others. And then, I mean, I look at the whole package. We look at the website, at the digital marketing, the traditional marketing strategy, at the PR strategy. We put together launches, we put together trade events and media events and things like that. So yeah, it's about telling the story, but it's also about getting the word out there, getting the wines out there, getting people to taste them. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about them, but they need to taste good, and people need to buy one bottle and then go back and buy another bottle and then become part of that story. And I think social media is really important at the moment. It's some brands I've spoken to, they don't want to be shouting on social media, but you have to be present on social media and have some sort of engagement that people can talk to you and feel like they're part of the story. And when they go out and taste your wine, they can tag you and they can engage and they can follow your story and learn about you as well, because the digital media brings everyone so much closer together. And maybe there's somebody in London who wants the wine or tastes the wine, but they wouldn't know anything about it if it wasn't for social media. And now somebody across the other side of the world feels like they're part of the story, and they know the story and they know the people behind the brand. And that's all brought together by this wonderful thing called social media.
And social media that in your hands does have a difference. There is so much content out there. Everybody is doing content. It's become a terrible word. It's such a bland and all-encompassing word that has lost a lot of its meaning in the hands of most people. But you do seem to amplify the brands on their terms rather than your own. You spend a lot of time working with them, getting under the skin and getting their DNA. And I think that's showing in the work that you're doing, because what you're saying really sounds like it's both coming from the brands and also is the kind of content I want to engage with. I'm enjoying engaging with it.
Yeah, you need to keep the brand's personality. It's all very good. There's so many social media agencies, and you can tell when you look at a brand's Instagram feed that there's somebody sitting there at a desk and however far away from the farm, who's probably never been to the farm before, and they're just producing mundane, boring content. And it's just, you can see that it's got no personality. You can see that it's got nothing to do with the brand. It's a marketing strategy, and then someone's been told to write something about this and probably put it into ChatGPT and then spewed out some very mundane, boring content. And I think that's really important, that you keep the personality of the brand. You know, the voice of the brand needs to come through, the personality needs to come through. Everybody who's reading it must think that the winemaker has written it themselves. You know, it's almost like they're engaging, having a conversation with that winemaker. I think that's vital.
Go Bubbles, says Maylie Lambert, who is watching the show at the moment on her 3rd or 4th bottle of free wine that's been delivered to her so far today. Thank you, Maylie. Glad you're watching. Andrew, it's all well and good for Bubbles to do exactly what she's doing and doing particularly well. But to paraphrase Ernie Els on the show last year when he spoke about his journey with Ernie Els Wines, you can sell the first bottle on your name, but the second bottle's got to be on the quality of wine. You might sell the first bottle because Bubbles done an absolutely thunderously good Instagram post, but if the wine's no good, you're not going to sell number 2. Tell me a bit about the Mellish wine and why from that point you feel you've got a product that's going to back up whatever social media might go out.
Yes, Dan. Yeah, I mean, the quality is a huge focus because we're such a small volume brand. We can never really compete with the guys that have these big volumes. So we have to play in the game of quality. So, I mean, the nice thing about having such small volumes is that you can be so focused and you can give every barrel so much attention, and, you know, every crate of grapes coming in can get so much attention. So I think we tested out the wine and we just found that there was something there. I think the terroir of Durbanville has a lot to offer, and maybe it's been a bit sort of not as celebrated in the industry as it should be. But I think the potential's there, and I'm starting to see in the valley sort of a turning a corner where people are really starting to make some really exciting wines, and I think it's going to be a region that people are talking more and more about in the future. So yeah, I just believe in our vineyard. We started farming organically in 2015, and that sort of coincided with the drought, and our vineyards took a big knock. I was still kind of figuring out the whole organic farming thing, and our yields dropped quite a bit, but that was actually a blessing in disguise. As our canopies got smaller and our yields got lower, we actually started to find better quality. And yeah, I'm very happy with how the wines have turned out. It's really simple winemaking, so it's not anything that I'm doing that's amazing. It's really just the vineyard telling its own story, and the main thing for me is just to manage the vineyard during the growing season, and crucially picking at the right time, so that I don't have to make any crazy adjustments in the cellar. If I pick at the right time and it's got good natural acidity but still has the ripeness to give a full-bodied mid-palate wine, then you're onto a winner. So I think we've got a lot of potential there, and we're seeing it in the wines, and I'm very excited for the future. Our vineyards are now sort of around 20 years old, so they're sort of mature vines now, but I think there's you know, a lot to look forward to going forward.
You mentioned the Durbanville area and the different varietals you're doing. Bubbles talking about Durbanville being a little under the radar. We had a number of the slightly smaller producers, people like Daria, on the show just a few weeks ago talking about Durbanville and the point that they made, not just themselves, but through the wine that they'd sent up for me to sample, was that there is just such capacity for variety from the terroir of Durbanville, and not just the Sauvignon Blanc, for which the valley is so well known. That seems to reflect in what you're doing, the ability to go into a number of different spaces and create some quite different wines.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, if you look at the valley as a whole, there are guys that are making great bubbly. Obviously, Sauvignon Blanc's been talked about over and over, but you know, there's also some great Bordeaux white blends. Shiraz is starting to sort of make a bit of a name for itself. Chardonnay even. Pinotage has been on the red side, one that's done very well. And I think it's a region that really can do well in a whole lot of categories, and not sort of just sort of stuck pigeonholed with the Sauvignon Blanc. And with the Sauvignon Blanc itself, I'm starting to see a lot of the producers are starting to make a little bit more nuanced, complex layered style Sauvignon Blanc, which is also very nice to see. And yeah, from our side at the moment, we just have the Blanc Vermeil and the Syrah on in the market. But we do have some Chenin and Pinotage in the cellar, and they're tasting fantastic out of the barrel. And I'll be bottling those in December and probably releasing them sort of September next year. So very excited about those two wines coming onto the portfolio.
Another gem from Durbanville. It might be a little under the radar for now. I'm not sure that's going to carry on for too much longer. The wines of Simelia, Simon, you've got the three ranges. You touched on one or two of them a moment ago. What I love about the reserve range is that you do keep them back, and they're wines that arrive on the market with a fair bit of time behind them, which is wonderful for those of us who are drinking them. Just break them down for us in a little more detail, how they fit into the different categories, and what we can expect from them all.
So we do only two ranges of the reserve range currently. There is a third one in planning. And if I just show the bottle again, we do a Syrah, and that is from a verified old vine vineyard from 1980, as I said. And then we do a Merlot, 100% Merlot as well. And the range, we started with the range actually in the drought. And in 2016, we brought out the first one. This is now the 17 we're bringing out. The 2016, we went overseas. I see once in a year my mentors in Italy mainly. And then we discuss what is good, what is bad, what can be done better. And based on that, we actually decided in 2016 to bring out the first reserve, which was quite exciting for me. I wasn't really keen to bring out a reserve in those times. So I thought the media and the journalists made the 16 year, because of the drought, brought a bit down from the quality. But being in Europe and trying the wines, they all said, this is an excellent wine. You need to come out with a reserve. So that's where we started with a reserve. The Syrah is called Senectus. Senectus means just old. And the Merlot is called Fluvius. Fluvius means riverbed. Our Merlot lies right at the bottom of the farm at an ancient riverbed. So for that, it's quite special. It's like when you go there and you have a look, you don't think you are at Grünberg, you think you're somewhere at the left bank. If you look at the old vine Syrah, high up, 350, 400 meters above sea level, obviously complete different climate. And yeah, up and coming is in 19 we brought out, no, in 20, I'm sorry. In 20 we will bring out a Cabernet. Obviously what I do is I'm very focused on the grapes which do well in this region. So I would plant what is doing well rather than the market ones.
Which is a great philosophy to have, and I think it's always going to result in better wines when the direction comes from the winemakers and from their passion. In terms of what we are drinking, if somebody's watching this now and saying is perhaps what Grant Sauls is saying, watching at the moment, all the wines sound interesting, we'll have to give them a try and consider adding them to the cellar. Thank you for the recommendations, Bubbles and Dan. Great show. As always, Dan, thank you, Grant. Lovely to have you watching. If somebody like Grant is watching and thinks, maybe I should try some, but what's going to sway them? What's making the wine for you, Simon, stand out? What's making somebody say, yep, this is the one I want to invest in. I want to buy a few bottles and see what Simon's wine has got to deliver for me?
Well, I think the one part, which also Andrew mentioned, is that we produce very, very small quantities. So if I do the reserve range, if it's 3 barrels, it's 3 barrels. So we do, 1,000 bottles. It's 4 barrels, 1,200, 1,300 bottles. So this reserve range is a very, very limited and will stay a very limited edition. There's a lot of care taken into that wine. So it's being monitored for 3 or maximum 4 years in the barrel. We see, are we okay? We don't add any sulfur during this entire process in our topping of the wine, which is obviously in the industry quite risky kind of adventure to do, because we hardly have any free sulfur when we take the wine out. But I'm very, very sensitive myself to sulfur. So we're not organic, but we add as little sulfur as possible. And I think if you ask me why would I buy that wine, it's just these wines are absolute beauties. The 17, they are still babies. I mean, this whole concept is sort of based on the Barolo concept. You can't bring out a wine for 5 years and call it a Barolo. It's just a very, very special wine for me, and I just love drinking it.
Well, it shines through very, very clearly. I suspect everybody else who gets a hand on a bottle will have a similar sentiment. Justin, what about the range for you? People will be more familiar with the Constantia Glen wines than with the family wines. I'd imagine this is the break free, be creative, turn into a Zelf and the mentors, run wild with stuff that's maybe a little esoteric, a little left of center, stuff that commercially might not have the right momentum to bring out on the kind of scale you would at Constantia Glen. So what have we got, and what prompts you to bring out the wines that you do?
Yeah, Dan, exactly that. It's that sort of, just ability to explore and the sort of curiosity to work with new varieties or regions. I think one thing, so the reason this all came about is I was probably nagging the Constantia Glen owner for quite a few years if he'd be interested in planting, anything but Bordeaux varieties on Constantia Glen. I mean, I think Syrah is a variety that will do very well in Constantia. And he said, you know what? We're definitely not going to do Bordeaux, but what you can do is, explore, be curious, fulfill that sort of need to work with other varieties and other regions, and that's where that sort of came about in 2016, was that ability to go and seek out vineyards, and it was especially interesting at the time. I was sort of introduced to Jaco Engelbrecht, and got to work with some amazing old vines, and still working with some old vines, especially with Cinsault in the Darling area. So it's it's as you said, it is a side hustle, but it's a fun project. I've got the freedom to produce wines like that I certainly wouldn't be able to be doing here in Constantia, in the Constantia Valley. So and I just love working also, or sort of speaking to farmers. So I mean, there's been a lot of talk about vineyards here, and I don't have my own vineyards, but I'm fortunate to be working with farmers who are really dedicated, and it's amazing how much has happened in the last decade in terms of viticulture, and not only the winemakers but also the farmers starting to realize the asset of old vineyards and putting a lot of effort into those vineyards. So and then the reward, I suppose, is that we've got these awesome wines, and it's not just mine, there's hundreds of them on the market, and I just think it's a great showcase for South Africa, and it's a real upliftment of the entire South African wine scene.
Old vines, one resource you mentioned. A great winemaker is another pretty good resource for a wine estate. Why on earth then, and I know the answer to this question, but I'm asking it nonetheless because I suspect there'll be a few people who are wondering it as they watch, why would Constantia Glen allow you to go off and make your own wine? Surely they're competing with theirs, and this is not in their best interest. It is, of course, but explain why. Yeah,
so it's it's very much a joint sort of effort and a joint venture. So all my wines, the Wyk Family Wines, are available for tasting and for sale here at Constantia Glen. So the owner of Constantia Glen, I think he very much realized that there's a great potential to be making extraordinary wines from these old vineyards, and there was a gap in that at our tasting room and at our restaurant on the farm here at Constantia Glen. We were only serving Sauvignon Blanc and Bordeaux style reds. So there was an immediate gap to showcase some additional wines. And I think the most important thing was that we didn't want to introduce, easy sort of entry level wines. And there was an opportunity to actually produce something special. And I was really fortunate, that this sort of special project, I could take ownership of it and really, do what I like as long as it's good. That's the most important thing. It's got to be good quality, and I think that's what Andrew mentioned. In terms of making good quality wine, it comes down to the vineyard. So that's where it's sourcing the correct fruit from the correct site, and that's why I've mentioned old vines, but there's a lot of the vines that I work with which are young vineyards. The Syrah vineyard that I work with in Elgin is not an old vineyard. It was planted in the late 90s, but I just think it's a spectacular site. It's producing a style of Syrah that I really enjoy drinking, and it's much easier for me to sell a product that I enjoy to other people. So it's been real fun.
Conversely, very hard to sell one that you don't enjoy, which makes it an easy job, given this really is a terrific range of wine, one worth seeking out. Before we go back to Bubbles, one quick question for each of our winemakers. Justin, starting with you. 2 wines to recommend, please, for this Saturday as we watch the Springboks hopefully put England to the sword. One of your wines for me to drink, and then what should I be drinking from 2007 with a rugby link, as obscure as you might like to make it, in my plan to get the Springboks over the line to another trophy by drinking a wine each game from a year in which they won a trophy?
Yeah, so I think from my range, the best one would be the Rebecca May, which is a Cinsault Syrah and Grenache. The current vintage 2021. It's a Platter 5-star wine, but it's super light, easy drinking red. And then from 2007, but I have to suggest the maiden vintage of the Constantia. That 2007 was the maiden vintage of the Constantia Glen wines, and the 2007 Constantia Glen 5. You wanted a rugby link? I don't know. Oh, Alan Cocroft. So Alan Cocroft, there is a rugby link. Alan Cocroft was the first farm manager. He actually planted all the Constantia Glen vineyards on Constantia Glen in the year 2000, 2001. He didn't go on to play for South Africa, but he played for SA Schools. He was the prop for SA Schools for 2 years, and he played for Marty's for a good, he extended his degree, they said, by 4 years so he could continue playing for Doc Craven. So, a fantastic guy. And he actually planted all the vineyards on Constantia Glen.
That is a more than good enough link. Next challenge is trying to find a bottle of 2007 Constantia Glen 5. Watch your phone ringing in about 10 minutes time, Justin. All right, that's a great suggestion. Let's jump over to Simon. Simon, a wine from your range for me for Saturday, and then if you can come up with one, something I could be drinking, you reckon, from 2007 that might have even a tenuous rugby link.
Well, I'm going to drink our 2013 vintage, which is aging just beautiful. It's very young, so I will open one of that. We're going, as I said, going to relaunch that. So we're having the launch on Wednesday with the 17 vintages, but we're also going to relaunch the 10-year vintage on the same day, poured out of magnums. So it's quite exciting. So that I will drink. And with regard to a rugby link, I would actually go for an international wine. I would drink, obviously coming from my own nation, a Riesling. And the rugby link is maybe not really a rugby link, but the guy who is producing this Riesling is a 2007 Spätli is a Wiener Uhr. It's SA Prüm, not JJ Prüm, but SA Prüm. So it's a 2007 vintage, and the owner of that estate, he could be a former really good rugby player.
All right, some Riesling from a German rugby star. I think we can add that to the list of possibilities for Saturday. I shall seek that out, as I will the 2013 Syrah. 10-year-old Syrah, that sounds very much up my street. Andrew, just to wrap up the same question, what are we drinking from the Mellish range? Then what can I be looking for 2007 that's got a rugby twist to it for this Saturday?
Okay, great. Well, I'll say I'll try our Blanc for May. It's a 2021 vintage, so it's a bit of skin contact on that wine. It's barrel fermented, barrel aged on the lees for 9 months. a very different style of Sauvignon Blanc, which I love drinking it myself, and I'm sure everyone else will enjoy it out there. So I'd recommend that. And then for the rugby connection, I would say from Annandale Winery with Hempy's de Toy, anything from his cellar from 2007. My father actually played rugby against him at club level. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. Those reds age very well.
That is another terrific selection. It looks like it's a thirsty night in store. Although given the stress of last night, some stress relief will be much needed. Just before we wrap up, it's been a delightful hour and a bit with all of you. Bubbles, very quickly, the work at the Norval Foundation. I've seen some stuff come through on that. It looks both lots of fun, but also a really nice initiative bringing the worlds of art and wine together with the Norvals.
Yeah, I think art and wine, creativity is essential for both, and I think that brings them both together. Louis Norval, the owner of the Norval Foundation, he's an avid art collector and wine lover, and he wanted to somehow bring art into the Norval Foundation. So they took me on to help launch their NF50 Wine Club, which is an exclusive wine club, and all the profits go towards their the Norval education program, where they bring in lots of children from all over, from underprivileged areas, and give them a bit of a wine education and tour of the art gallery, and as a book to take home, and a really nice experience and day out, and really investing in the South African youth and trying to sort of give them a bit of a sort of art education, which I don't think they normally would have access to. And the NF50 Wine Club we brought together Louis, and it was in conjunction with Mark Kent as well, was their brainchild. And they brought together 5 of the South African's best winemakers. So it was Andrew and Chris Mellish from Louis Passant, Callie Lowe from Porcelainberg, Chris Allight from Allight, Sadi, we don't need any introductions, and also Hannah Storm from Storm Wines. So those 5 winemakers made exclusive bottlings for the NF50. So the 50 members that was invitation only, then get 5 cases of these 5 wines. And then, the profits went towards the Norval Foundation and the education program it's running. So it was a really nice collaboration. It's just nice to bring it. It's such a beautiful space, and it's really nice to work with them and to bring wine and art together like that.
That is a wonderful platform. Maybe there'll be a Norval Bubbles Dan Really Likes Wine collaboration in the future. I think we might need a glass of wine or two to discuss that as a possibility. Between now and that happening, though, there's plenty to follow from Bubbles. Where do we get you? Where are we reading, watching, discovering what you're up to and what your brands are up to, Bubbles?
So my Well Read Wine magazine Instagram is the Well Read Wine mag. That's my main focus on social media, and then I've now started up a separate one called Well Read Co, where I support my consumers. There's always a fine line of being a little favorsome of your clients, so we have to keep them separate. That I'm not being not giving them too much attention on my normal Well Read. So that's why I brought up a separate Instagram account. So there's Well Read Co and Well Read Wine Mag.
So now you know where to find Bubbles and the brands that she works with, and she's having a lot of fun with them. And as you can see from the wine brands themselves, fair amount of success as well. Guys, lovely having all of you on the show today, lighting up the start of a week that hopefully the Springboks will finish off for us on a good note come Saturday. A reminder to look out for the wines of Simelia, of Mellish, and the Van Wyk family, and to keep an eye on Bubbles for more news and developments as they unfold. Enjoy the rest of the week, guys. I'm off to find the 2007 wines that you recommended. I'm not sure how easy any of them will be to come by, but I shall do my best. And in the interim, I'll make sure I've got some Simelia, some Mellish, and some Van Wyk to keep me going as well. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, Bubbles. Thanks for throwing it all together, and really appreciate the time, everybody.
Cheers, Dan. Thank you.
So there we go. I got through the entire show without mentioning that Bubbles' real first name is Mildred. So that wraps us up there. A big thank you to Bubbles from the Well Read company, Well Red Wine Magazine. Thank you too to Andrew from Mellish, to Simon from Simelia, and to Justin from Wyk Family Wines. 3 projects on the smaller side of the wine scale, but making not just delightful wine, but really interesting wine, and wine that, as you saw from today's show, has a very, very personal story behind every single brand. And that is why somebody like Bubbles is so excited to get stuck in. She's an asset to the industry, and we all benefit as a result. That wraps us up for today. Look out later on the week. I think Thursday, there's some more rugby-scented wine with a couple of surprise guests as we make our way through October. There are going to be Christmas shows coming up in the not too distant future. If you're coming along on Thursday, I will see you at Brookdale for the launch therein. I will also see you with Gerard Holden of Holden Mance next Monday evening as we taste at Norman Goodfellows. Hope to see you there. And don't forget our Avante Brandy competition with John Smith, your chance post-World Cup to enjoy an hour with my half an hour online with myself and John, and a couple of bottles of Avante Brandy in celebration of the World Cup winning Springboks new brandy range. That does it for this evening. Have a fantastic week. Count down those hours till Saturday night. I'll see you on Thursday. Goodbye.